Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined today by the 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young, as well as the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch. I'm Doug Faulkner, Agriculture Director at GX94 in Yorkton, and we wanted to start things off this week by talking about the federal budget. It came down on Tuesday, and both Ryan and I had chances to speak with a number of officials with different organizations. Ryan, you spoke to the CFA and the Grain Growers of Canada.
That's right, yeah. And starting with Keith Currie, who's the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, he was kind of taking more of a kind of a positive tone with the federal budget overall. He definitely saw some positives with regards to the budget, most notably just the fact that agriculture is mentioned in the budget. Kind of leading into Kyle Larkin, who else I talked to. He's with the Grain Growers of Canada. I believe it was Kyle that mentioned that the budget was mentioned over 90 times in this one compared to just 4 times in last year's budget. So it kind of tells you a little bit about where they are, where the industry is rather on the priority list. But going back to Keith Currie, he was kind of pleased to see some previously announced measures included in the federal budget, including changes to agri-stability and so on. Across all the farm groups as well was the complete reversal of the capital gains tax increase and some of the other controversial changes that were being proposed by the feds and even deferred to January 1 of 2026. That now appears to not be the case, so all the farm groups are happy to see that finally. And yeah, those were kind of the things that kind of stood out right away. Doug, what were some of the thoughts that Bill Prabilski at APAS was kind of thinking of?
Yeah, Bill Prabilski had mixed feelings on the budget as well. He was happy to see that the capital gains increase was reversed, obviously, and there was some talk about reducing bureaucratic red tape. He did have some concerns about cutting funding to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, though, when it came to research projects, whether it be grain or cattle or whatever the case may be. He said, of course, first glance at the budget, you don't really get all the deep details. Of course, the devil is in the details. And Kevin, what was your take on the budget? Did you have a chance to peruse it?
I think all of the things you guys mentioned are valid points. The one other thing that will affect producers directly is the accelerated capital cost allowance. So they're going to reinstitute a system whereby you can much more quickly depreciate a new piece of equipment for tax purposes. So get the tax saving on that. That's an incentive to go in and make that purchase if you're so inclined. The other things in the budget, the increase in the advance payments, interest-free portion, the increase in agri-stability compensation rate to 90%. We've heard those before, and it was widely expected that the capital gains inclusion rate change would be nullified, so that was in there as well. I guess the only thing that bothers me is I still am one that believes that we have to do more to bring down the deficit. $78 billion, yeah, and you can measure it different ways as a percent of GDP and all of those other things. But by the end of this year, according to the Canadian Taxpayers Association, our total debt is expected to hit $1.3 trillion. The interest on that debt is about $65 billion. Look what we could do if we had that $65 billion rather than just spending it to pay the interest on this. So I really think that, yes, many of these investments, including corridors, export corridors, I think they're all worthy investments. But at the end of the day, we're really taxing our children and grandchildren. Someday this is all going to be paid for.
So that was the federal budget on Tuesday. Then Wednesday, Thursday, Regina became a focus when the SARM midterm convention was held there. Ryan, you had a chance to check that out.
That's right. Most notably, some of the resolutions that were voted on in the midterm convention. I'll just go over some of the ones that are agriculture related. There was 4 of them overall out of the 26 in total that were voted on Wednesday afternoon. One of the resolutions that was approved on called on SARM to lobby the federal and provincial governments to expand or amend the wildlife damage compensation program to include compensation for animal-related damage to grain bags, as well as lobby the Ministry of Agriculture to improve measures or cost share programs to help producers protect grain bags. One of the things that was kind of surprising was the fact that the vote was as close as it was. It was approved ultimately, but only with 51% of those in favor of the resolution and about 49 to 48% voting against it. So kind of interesting there. Usually you see all these resolutions, they pass with like 91 to 95% approval rates. So it's kind of an interesting little tidbit there. Another thing that was approved among the agricultural related resolutions was for SARM to lobby the governments to find better alternatives to strychnine or reintroduce strychnine until a better cost effective alternative is found, and also to lobby the Ministry of Ag to implement legislation that would essentially control the overpopulation of Richardson ground squirrels and support measures to bring that population down. We know that ground squirrels have been a particular issue this growing season in Saskatchewan. So those were the ones that were approved. And then there was a couple of other ag-related resolutions that were defeated. Basically, again, the wildlife damage compensation program is kind of what they centered on, but to include compensation for damage of pasture land and crops due to wildlife. And again, those were defeated. So those were 4 out of the total of 26 resolutions voted on. People can go to the SARM YouTube channel if they wanted to check out the debate and discussion on all 26 resolutions. Bill Huber, the president of SARM, he also did a scrum with reporters during the convention, and he talked about various things, strychnine being one of them, obviously. He also talked about more funding for Western Canada, bringing up familiar arguments for, Western Canada to be included in federal talk, and more funding for agriculture, broadly speaking, and so on. So those were kind of the things brought up in the midterm convention. It's kind of more of an educational learning kind of event for SARM compared to the annual convention when the provincial leaders meet up and have the bear pit session. So yeah, those are some of the things to kind of take away from the midterm convention.
Kevin, did any of those SARM resolutions catch your eye?
The one on grain bags is very interesting, and interesting that it was only passed by a small majority asking for compensation for grain bags. And it would seem to indicate there's not as much favor or sympathy for grain bag damage as there is for other forms of wildlife damage. And maybe that's because grain bags can be scattered over a large geographic area. They're not like your haystack where you're in one location and can look after it. So, but an interesting concept to be an interesting thought process as to whether or not grain bags should be covered for wildlife damage, because certainly wildlife upon occasion can do great damage in a grain bag situation.
Another story this week, of course, was one you provided us, Kevin, and that was regarding cattle prices. And you spoke with Brenna Grant from Canfax.
Yes, and I was interested to know how big the dip in calf prices had been due to the U.S. developments, talking about bringing down beef prices in the U.S., talk about increasing the tariff rate quota to potentially bring in more beef from Argentina. That affected American futures prices quite dramatically and did have an effect in the Canadian market. Brenna Grant said it was only a small dip last week, but listening to some of the reports from livestock markets across the province, I think the dip maybe continued this week. But overall, calf prices are record high by a large margin, and Brenna Grant believes that that's likely to continue at least for a year or two, and how quickly it comes to an end will depend upon heifer retention rates. But even after the heifer retention rate starts going up, then the clock starts ticking that it's 18 months or 2 years after that when the beef supply is actually increased. So an amazing time in history for cow-calf producers. They're making their returns. Of course, the costs are high too, but the returns are better than they've ever been in the cow-calf sector.
We also heard on Thursday that the Supreme Court of Canada declined to hear the case of the BC ostrich farm that was trying to prevent the cull of their ostriches, 300 plus ostriches that had been exposed to, and some who had suffered from avian flu way back in December. Their court efforts finally ran out, and I understand the CFIA began the cull late last night. It seemed to generate an awful lot of interest, and Kevin, you thought maybe a little too much interest, all things considered.
Well, it's surprising to me when you look at the millions of chickens that have been culled in recent years due to avian flu, and you look at the thousands of beef cattle that are culled due to bovine tuberculosis. I think there's lots of things to be looked at as far as CFIA procedures and how they do things, but I don't see any reason why ostriches would be treated differently than other forms of livestock. And all of it, I don't think the general public is aware of or really in their conscious levels as to how many livestock have been put down because of disease concerns, and this is just a regular part of stopping disease spread. For some reason, the ostriches received not only domestic attention across the country, but attention in the U.S., and everybody's sympathy was with the ostriches. Nobody ever said what these ostriches are being used for, but you have to presume they're being used for meat and leather and essential oils. So they were a livestock species, and even if they were pets, it's the same kind of procedures need to be followed. Now, that's not to say that CFIA does everything right or that they should be beyond reproach, but I don't think the ostriches should have been the special case that they were made out to be.
On Friday, Ryan, we heard some exchanges between the Saskatchewan party government and the opposition NDP when it comes to foreign farmland ownership. Interesting development there.
Yeah, definitely. This was something that kind of sprung up. I believe it was on Wednesday during question period. Now, before I go on, I will just say the caveat here that I will be following up on this and going through it with a fine-tooth comb. But this is what I've been seeing, kind of from a sky point of view. But from what it sounds like, the NDP was accusing the Sask party government of not only not doing a good job when it comes to enforcing the legislation related to farmland and ownership of farmland, but also allowing foreign entities such as the Chinese government, criminal organizations to come in, purchase farmland, and profit from said farmland. And those were comments made by Trent Witherspoon. He's the Deputy Agriculture Shadow Minister or critic for the NDP. And he said that multiple times this week. Now, Agriculture Minister Daryl Harrison has responded with a letter to Trent Witherspoon asking if you're making these accusations, provide some evidence to support your claims. Otherwise, stop saying those things because it's perceived as an abuse of the position that Trent Witherspoon is in. So Witherspoon responded back with a letter of his own, not providing any evidence, but just kind of continuing the attack on the provincial government's failures over the issue. So neither side has really budged an inch into this thing, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens come Monday. That's when Harrison said Trent Witherspoon has until Monday at 5 p.m. to provide evidence of his claims. So we'll see if this deteriorates or if cooler heads will prevail.
Kevin, what do you think of all this?
Well, certainly as you travel the countryside, you can find people that are absolutely convinced that there's foreign ownership. But at the end of the day, point to the specific case, and if there's a question about it, bring it up, take it to the Farmland Security Board. We stand behind an allegation rather than general allegations. So there certainly is a belief that there's foreign ownership happening, but until somebody actually points out a case and proves it, it's hard to give that much credibility.
All right. And then finally, I just wanted to wrap things up by talking about the 36th Annual Grain Millers Harvest Showdown, which is going on here in Yorkton. It wraps up on Saturday, November 8th. And I had a chance to attend the big show last night. It was the grain show and the pedigreed seed and the forage show. And of course, then they announced the 2025 Farmer Recognition Award, and it went to Brett and Rebecca Callan of the Salt Coast District as
It looks like we've got a freeze up in our feed here. So I think Doug was going to sign off with that on behalf of Doug from GX94 in Yorkton and Ryan from CKRM Regina. I'm Kevin Hirsch signing off on this edition of the Roundtable.